Never forget, our enemies want to take away my freedom because I will never let them take away your freedom. It's very simple. I'm not going to let them do it. They want to silence me because I will never let them silence you. And in the end, they're not after me, they're after you.
It's pretty good. I think the way he's framing that is pretty darn good. Polls show, by the way, threats to democracy are now moving voters of all stripes towards Trump. Republicans are now keener on the democracy issue. The question is whether the legal attack on Trump's going to affect Iowa. Nobody knows that better than, wait for it, Kellyanne Conway, former counselor to President Trump, Fox News contributor, author of Here's the Deal, a very good book. So you're seeing in the polls, Emerson polls and other polls, this democracy issue, which was kind of the domain of the Democrats, is now becoming a big Republican issue because of the attacks on Trump.
That's right. And these poll numbers, of course, Larry, came out before last night's Supreme Court decision in Colorado. I think it's only going to increase the number of Republicans and independents who cannot stand when the separation of powers is violated, when people are playing politics with governance. I think it's going to increase as a share of the population. You know, threats to democracy was always seen as a proxy for January 6th and Trump. But, you know, the two things that really fueled his candidacy, I think, this time in his third try at the presidency, is number one, when he visited East Palestine, Ohio. It really set him apart, and it was a big inflection point. It reminded everybody, here's a guy who's got a nose for going where the forgotten men or forgotten women are suffering. Secondly, were these indictments. I mean, look, we all know, and I've told Trump personally a long time ago, if in your life you are ever given a choice between being indicted or not being indicted, you choose door number 2 every time. But for him, it has helped, and not just with his base. That's the other misconception, the misconception that threats to democracy is just Trump, and January 6th. The other misconception is that that Trump somehow has his base all locked up and that's it. If that were the only thing he had locked up, he would not be beating Joe Biden by 6 points in Georgia, in every single swing state, in every single mainstream media-sponsored poll. That's base plus. It's Biden whose base we should be discussing every single day because he can't scaffold together that very tenuous collection of groups that came out for him in 2020 strong and long enough for him to become president. He's losing his grip on all of them. So I think all of this equals people being very frustrated and angry about what the Colorado Supreme Court
and moving
did.
and if moving,
Absolutely.
It's like moving day towards Trump. I like that clip. I like the way he handled that clip.
Yes.
It's not his grievance, it's our grievance. He's leading a movement. Now, we've seen this before from him, and it's very effective. He loses ground when it's only his grievance, but now he's representing a whole movement. I think you're right. People pick up the newspaper, say, what? They're going to keep him off the ballot? You can't do that. That's not democracy. So I agree. This just comes a few weeks before Iowa.
Yes.
Yes?
Well, he's way ahead there to begin with. Yes, the Iowa poll that came out, the Des Moines Register poll, the famous poll there, that showed him with the largest lead just a week ago, last Monday, the largest lead in the history of the poll over other Republican primary opponents. Now, they're still there. Ron DeSantis was there yesterday. Nikki Haley's there. They're still campaigning. I think they're hoping or wondering to be a placeholder in case he somehow is kicked off the ballots or convicted of something, goes to jail, or passes out on the golf course. So there they are. Other than that, there's not a big rationale for their candidacy right now. And I'll tell you why, Larry. When people say to me, oh, we need to find someone other than Trump, of course, I know how to handle that. But I say, well, that's fine. And in democracy, you have every right to feel that way. But this cycle, all of these other candidates had their shot to make the case to the people in the Republican primary, which in some states also means independents who can vote in a Republican primary. And they failed to make that case enough of the time that they could supplant Trump as the front runner. And I think the reason he's been able to burrow in there is because people are hiring him to do a job that he's already done.
Right.
They know what they're getting.
Right.
And he's done a fairly good job of pivoting to a general election strategy. He pivoted to a general election strategy a while ago. In the last 36 national polls that were conducted and released since October 27th, Trump is leading Biden in 27 to 36. About 6 of them, they're tied. But Biden is never outside the margin of error against Trump. It's even worse news for Biden when you look at the swing states.
Can I just raise this point? We know the economy, the failure of Bidenomics, undoubtedly the opening of the border and the whole collapse of the urban cities and the lawlessness and the drugs and the kidnappings. I get that. Huge issues. But I think as we watch Biden fumble with Israel, Iran, doesn't say anything about Iran, doesn't fight the Houthis, lets the Houthis push us around, fumbling in Ukraine, fumbling on the border, fumbling with grocery and gasoline. I mean, I think people want a tough guy, okay? My view, tough. I call it Trump tough. I think people just say, okay, I'm going to tune out some of the things he says occasionally that we don't like, but I want a tough guy representing this country. I haven't seen a poll on that. It's just my own instinct. But I hear it from people around.
Sure.
Okay, Christmas season. I hear it from a lot of people who are not Trumpers, you know.
Yes.
They might in the next breath say something that I don't like, and you know. But the fact that I think Biden is so weak, Kellyanne, and they want a tough guy, and there's one right there. There he is,
What's the
right
opposite
there.
of weak? It's strong.
Yes.
And strong and tough are related, but tough also means that you don't back down.
Right.
That you're resolute, not obstinate, resolute and focused. And you know, in Trump's first term, Larry, that allowed him to get the NATO partners to pay up a little bit more.
Yes, by the by.
To redo those trade deals with China,
Yes.
with Korea,
Yes.
with Japan, with Mexico and Canada.
Yes.
Of course, you were intimately involved in that, to get those Tax Cut and Jobs Act passed, and so on and so forth. And I think that strength to people also means that we projected around the globe a very chaotic, crisis-filled time. But it also means that it's strength here at home, that people don't have to worry about what, you know, if someone's going to follow through. The other thing today, speaking of weaknesses, Joe Biden made a colossal mistake by going right to the press today and saying there's zero question that Donald Trump was an insurrectionist. Yeah. They should call him as a witness in the next trial. He shouldn't say things like that. There is a question. Donald Trump has not been, as you said in the opening, he's not been charged or convicted anything to do with insurrection. And the last 5 words, by the way, that 14th Amendment section, says something about, you know, or trying to harm the country. In other words, it's so vague that you can argue it's when Biden gives billions to Iran. Yep. It's when people coming over the border.
When Biden gives billions to our enemies.
Yes, I mean,
when Biden flouts the law on the border by not protecting American sovereignty. That's why
any of it.
We don't have time. Maybe we'll talk some more about
careful.
this tonight. But I just think this theme of Trump tough.
Trump tough and strong. And listen, he's not tough for toughness' sake to argue with people.
No,
he's tough because that's what we need. We're supposed to be the global leader.
America first.
And we look weak.
He'll defend America. He'll hit the Houthis. I mean, I keep coming back to that. Kellyanne Conway, nothing but love. Now, you're filling in for Sean Hannity tonight at 9 p.m. I heard, among other people, you have a very important Fox Business guest who will join you.
And his name is
on set. And
the GOAT, Larry Kudlow. Will be joining me as
much more about that.
I'm in for Hannity. Let's do it.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Larry.
kiddo.
See you.